normal people become terrified of criminals.
Shots were just fired. Police just came out and told us, and we're headed there right now.
They become terrified of their own government.
The unhoused thing is like, I think it's leftist doublespeak to manipulate public policy positions, because you don't define house, right? So what we're saying is somebody who lives in some kind of structure, but it's not a house, so they're unhoused. What's a home, right? It's saying unhoused is applying a material position and like a resource number to what a person is required to have.
I'm personally not offended by the term homeless. I'm fine to use it, but given that that's what people who I know who work on this issue use, I just follow their lead.
Unhoused, you don't need a house.
I've heard people that live on the street.
You can live in someone else's couch and be homeless.
Okay.
So when you say someone's unhoused, it's the implication that they should be housed. But but
why shouldn't they be housed?
You deserve a house.
You deserve a home, somewhere to live. Yes.
A home is different from a house.
Okay, sure. I'm happy to call it unhomed if that,
No,
it's
I think it's
thing.
I think it's manipulative doublespeak to control a narrative and shift and gradually shift positions.
I know
towards
dudes that
give people houses,
or people that have slept on the street that say, I have a home and it's right over there on Fifth Avenue, so don't call me homeless. And I'm like, well, you're sleeping out in the open. And it's like, yeah, but that's my home.
If you rent your friend's couch, are you homeless?
No, you have a home. It's your couch.
But you're unhoused.
Technically not.
You would be unhoused. Yes, you would.
I don't like this manipulative doublespeak where they change language and change the definitions.
Yeah, you don't need paperwork to have a home or a house. You just need to literally be. But
the issue ultimately comes down to, what do you say to a man of sound mind who chooses to not have a home and live outside?
Don't poop on my street. That's number one.
I watched a homeless person from my window one time poop on my car.
Yeah.
In Brooklyn.
Somebody actually makes that choice.
I called the police and I said, hey, I don't know if this concerns you. There's a person pooping on my car. What should I do? And they were like, you got a hose?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't got a hose. And they were like, well, you might want to get a hose.
Sooner than later, because that stuff's acrylic.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
Acidic.
It was unpleasant.
If somebody makes the choice to not have a home, and they're so resourceful and so skilled that they can live out in the world like that, I say respect. I mean, good for you. That's amazing. I can never do that.
Well, in a tent?
I don't say it again.
In a tent?
Sure, yeah. I mean, but I don't think that's what most. I don't think most people who live on the streets. I don't think it's a choice. I think they're put there by circumstances beyond their control.
When I worked for the shelter network, I did 80% was a choice.
Yeah, I think
really,
80%.
80%.
Yeah.
Do you understand why that's hard to believe?
Because you've never worked in the industry and you don't know anything about. You don't have no idea what you're talking about.
I did spend a summer.
I'm sorry. Dude,
I spent one summer working with the unhoused population. Who
you think a guy who's.
It sounds like you have more experience than I do, because I just spent one summer.
It's just like go to California, go to LA, go like some areas in Westwood. I know UCLA is up there, so they push a lot of this stuff out. But I remember going to a shopping center somewhere. Where was I? Somewhere near Hollywood, slightly west of Hollywood. And it's like 5 homeless guys all living up against the side of a building. And a lady gets out of the tent, walks in the middle of the street, just takes a dump. Yeah. And when you go to them and be like, we got a bed, we got a private room, and they say, F you.
Because the shelters are terrible. They've all probably had terrible experiences.
And some of them are houses. Some of them are full houses, a 5-bedroom house. And you'd go to someone and be like, how would you like keys to a house and a bedroom? And they go, you got a manager there? I'm like, we do. Never going to happen. We're like, well, I don't know what to tell you, man.
Okay, so look, I can't extrapolate based on that applies then to the majority of the community. I just
you
can't.
Can make the argument.
But maybe you're right. But regardless, why not try at least? Why not give the opportunity?
What do you think all these nonprofits are doing?
Well, I think they're working within a very tough system to do what they can, but they don't have the resources.
I think the problem is Democrats.
Because we're spending all our money on wars, so there's not enough to give people.
I don't know if it's a 1-for-1, but I would agree with not spending money on wars and at least
giving a shot.
No, I'm gonna tell you. I'll tell you this. I would take every single penny from every single warmonger, and I would give it to one homeless guy who couldn't think straight. Because I'm just like, I can't stand this. We're better off. We're better off because in the long run, we save money if we're not engaged in these garbage wars for no reason.
We can legitimately 3D print graphene homes for people, but the key is to get them in, to get them to want to take a shower and join the system when people are already checked out of the system.
We had some people who would stay there were forever shelters and there were temporary shelters. And if you were a consistent temporary shelter individual, they could upgrade you or move you to the permanent shelter. There were legitimate people that I have met who are like, man, I lost my job and I have no friends and I don't know how to do anything. Like, if you give me a job, I'll do whatever it takes. These people have recovered. But these people don't exist as much in, like, the reason why homelessness tends not to be that is because those people will, given the opportunity, leave instantly. A guy is homeless for 2 weeks. The shelter comes up and says, we want to help you. He goes, please, I'll take whatever you got. 3 months later, he's sharing an apartment with some other guys, a couple $100 a month, no longer a homeless problem. But the reason why most homeless people you see in the street are there is because they want to stay there and don't want to leave. In Chicago, for instance, they use these bridges to make little villages. And they, in between each pillar, there's like, so the way it works is there's sidewalk and there's an elevated portion with pillars. And they set up beds in between each section. You will never get them to move. Jane's right there. John's across the street. This is my town. And so they're covered in urine. There's feces everywhere. They dump in the streets. And you show up and say, we want to help you. And they go, help with what? We want to give you a home and help you get out of the situation. I like my situation. Have a nice day. Leave. And so now we have the problem of, like in California, tents everywhere. In DC, it's happening. Tents everywhere. And it's leading to needles in the streets. We went to, man, it's so brutal. It was this really nice little historic town in Maryland. And I took a picture of syringes and condoms on the ground. Yeah. And I'm like, it's because we've become, and this is why I say there's no moral answer. Americans do not want to accept that you need some kind of like harsh force and authority when it comes to what people are doing in public. Yep,
that's what I come down to, man.
It used to be people wearing suits everywhere they went in the early 1900s.
And hats, too.
And hats. Don't know about all that.
I love
but there was heavy social and police enforcement. You're walking around drunk in public, they would lock you up. They still do, sort of, to this day, depending on the degree of drunkenness, but most people just ignore it now.
In my experience, people who are dealing with addiction and mental illness and other self-defeat, really self-harmful behavior, are dealing with trauma, something really bad that's happened to them from a very, very young age. And what I would want to do in any kind of effort to alleviate homelessness is address that. And it's not, I agree with you that providing shelter and a home is not a panacea. It's not a one-size-fits-all policy. So it have to come with addressing the issues that make people destitute and desperate in the first place. And that's, a lot of that has to do with suffering terrible experiences from a very, very young age or at some point in their lives.
Cultural shifts.
And if you deal psychological trauma, and if you deal with that, then you might be able to have the kind of shift that I think you're talking about. I can't vouch for your statistics. I mean, you've worked.
I'm talking about one city, by the way. Or I'm not talking about like every city in the country or everywhere I've been.
But you're saying that if you went around to all the people in LA and offered them, a home, a place to live,
my friend, if you went,
the majority would not accept it.
Absolutely,
Yes, really?
no question.
I promise they will.
I mean, look, and worse still, you might get physically hurt.
Yeah.
And it's not because every single homeless person is violent. I'm saying it's because there's a viral video of a homeless guy. Did you guys see this video? He had the knife and he was swinging at the lady who lived in the building. Because some people are crazy. And if you have 3,000 homeless people and you go around asking each and every one of them, you eventually counter someone who gets agitated and crazy. They're scared because, I mean, they'll take your stuff from you. They'll try and control you. They'll take away your drugs. They'll tell you what you can and can't do. They'll tell you when you can go outside and when you can't go outside.
Yeah.
So nobody wants to be in these situations. But if you tell someone, we've got a place for you to sleep, you can get cleaned up, they'll say, okay. And then they'll start using it to amplify the negative behaviors that were causing the problems in the first place.
Well, then I'd want to know why they have that drive to perpetuate their negative behaviors. And I would
why do
bet
people do drugs?
I would bet in 100% of cases it's because of trauma, because they've suffered something horrible in their lives, and this is their way of dealing with it. We can see that for people of privilege when they have an issue that's self-defeating, they have some sort of adverse childhood experience that they're not dealing with. So I'd want to know in every case what caused someone to be so self-harmful to themselves and other people. And I have a friend who volunteers every Saturday with homeless people in LA, and he has a different picture of the community he serves than you've had. And I'm not trying to negate your point. You have your experience and I respect it. I just think certain things that would need to happen to address this issue haven't been tried.
I try to interface with the broken people one-on-one, and it's not scalable. After I really emotionally connected with 50 broken humans, I started to go insane, and I had to stop. I almost killed myself because it was so much pain. I had to empathize with so much pain. So that's not a sustainable. And then I'm just like, should we just be like those? Sometimes humans walk so far psychologically, they just walked off a cliff. Now they're feral, and we got to treat them like wild animals. Or can every human be reached?
I think that's a possibility, but why shouldn't we do all we can to try? Why not? We put so much effort into war. Why can't we try to do everything we can to
I actually
to save
think
people?
it is our incessant need to try and help, actually, which is what contributing massively to the problem. And what I mean by that is we have created a society where we've enabled mass homelessness through these programs. If there was no food and no one gave them food, then they would just simply stop. And it's like the argument now is why I said there's no moral answer humans will be willing to accept. There's activist groups like Food Not Bombs, and they're like, did you know it's illegal to give homeless people food? It's really funny because you have these signs in the forest everywhere saying, do not feed bears, they'll become dependent and dangerous. Yet you also have left-wing activists who are like, we should set up a bunch of food and give food out to people, which is also particularly offensive. As I have actually, having been an unhoused person several times in my life, the implication that I was hungry simply because I didn't have my own place to live is like offensive. Like, what do you mean? I was playing guitar in the subway once. I was not homeless. And a woman asked me if I was hungry. And I said, no, but thank you for asking. And then she asked me if I needed a place to sleep. And I said, it was really funny. I was playing guitar, making pretty decent money. And I was just like, I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm going to go back to my 2-bedroom in Bucktown and just play video games tonight. And she went, huh? Like the assumption that people who are playing music in the street, separate side note, are homeless. The assumption that someone who might be homeless is also hungry. These are all completely incorrect things. And I think it stems from these well-to-do liberal types in cities want to help, and I can respect it, but they actually make the problem worse.
But why not be touched that someone feels compelled to try to help somebody out, even if they got you wrong, they read you wrong? That impulse to try to help you, I think, is a nice thing.
So I'm not saying it's not, but if there's a dude who is constantly doing drugs, and you're like, you know what, these drugs are really bad for him, but I'm going to help him make sure he gets the drugs done right. Like, I don't know if you're actually helping the guy. I think you should
it depends how.
Stop it.
If
by
he's
force.
if he's using dirty water to inject heroin, then if you're giving him clean needles, I do think that's helping him because you're preventing him from you're helping to prevent him from possibly
or you can just
dying.
stop him from doing drugs.
Well, you can't do that though, because the question is, why is he doing drugs in the first place? And 100% of the time, it's because of some trauma. And I'm very biased on this because
100%
I'm very biased on this because I have a father who works on this stuff.
But do you know what caused like the opioid crisis?
What caused the opioid crisis?
So a large component of what caused it is someone gets injured, they get prescribed opioids, and they get addicted, and they can't get off. Then when the doctor cuts them off abruptly, they go seek black market means of getting it and creates a bunch of criminals. So it's not so much about trauma, but like,
not everyone who gets injured gets addicted to opioids.
Of course.
So the question is,
but a lot of people got prescribed it, and
Yes,
the
they did.
prescriptions turned into addiction.
And a
That's
lot of
not
pe-
trauma.
That'd be physical trauma.
You know that Bayer,
lot of
the
people have-
company that made aspirin, created heroin and started marketing it to people who were addicted to morphine to help get them off it.
But
And
look,
then
look,
doctors were
profiteering
prescribing
is certainly a
heroin.
huge problem. But
You
the
wanna-
question is, why is there that? What does look? Addiction, drugs, it gives you a dopamine rush, and then you get addicted to that. Why do you have a need for a dopamine rush? And there's plenty of research on this. I recommend my dad's work on this. His name is Gabor Mate. He's a
I love his
physician.
work, man.
Yeah.
I've been seeing him all over TV
Yeah,
lately.
Yeah. So anyway, but I'm not going to speak for his work, but I'm just saying is consider the possibility that people who are addicted, it's not the drugs in and of themselves. It's what the drugs are doing for their pain.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.